Have you ever wondered what it was like to live in a world where two global giants stood on the brink of total annihilation, holding the fate of humanity in their hands? This wasn't a movie plot. This was the reality of the Cold War, a decades-long struggle that defined the second half of the 20th century. Stick around as we unpack this epic tale of spies, nukes, and a battle for the very soul of the planet. So, how did it all start? Picture this. World War II has just ended. Cities are in ruins, and the old world order is shattered. Out of this chaos, two victors emerge, stronger than anyone else: the United States and the Soviet Union. But here's the catch, Day. Couldn't be more different. The US championed capitalism, democracy, and individual freedom. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, was all about communism, a single-party state, and collective control. It was like oil and water. They were wartime allies against a common enemy, but once that enemy was gone, the deep-seated distrust and ideological rivalry between them exploded onto the world stage. They were the new superpowers, and the world wasn't big enough for both of their competing visions. This wasn't a war fought with soldiers charging at each other on a battlefield, but a Cold War, a tense, simmering conflict of ideas, influence, and intimidation. Now, let's talk about the scariest part. The nuclear arms race. After the US dropped atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II, the genie was out of the bottle. The Soviets were determined to catch up, and in 1949, they successfully tested their own atomic bomb. This kicked off the most terrifying arms race in human history. Both sides started stockpiling thousands of nuclear weapons, each one more powerful than the last. They developed hydrogen bombs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and nuclear submarines. The logic was chillingly simple. It was yet mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The idea was that if one side launched its nukes, the other side would have enough time to launch its own in retaliation, ensuring that both countries and likely the rest of the world would be completely wiped out. This fear of global nuclear winter became a constant, nagging anxiety for people everywhere. Schoolchildren practiced duck-and-cover drills, and some families even built backyard fallout shelters. This existential dread reached its absolute peak in October 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Imagine the tension. American spy planes discovered that the Soviets were secretly installing nuclear missile sites in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. For 13 agonizing days, the world held its breath. President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev engaged in a high-stakes standoff. U.S. ships blockaded Cuba, and military forces were on the highest alert. We came terrifyingly close to nuclear war, closer than at any other point in history. It was a game of chicken with the fate of civilization on the line. Thankfully, diplomacy won. The Soviets agreed to remove the missiles in exchange for a U.S. promise not to invade Cuba and to secretly remove American missiles from Turkey. The crisis was averted, but it was a stark wake-up call about how quickly the Cold War could turn hot. Since the US and the USSR were terrified of fighting each other directly due to the risk of nuclear war, they found another way to compete. They fought through proxy wars. This meant they would pick opposing sides in conflicts all over the world, turning local civil wars into international ideological battlegrounds. Think of it like two chess masters using other countries as their pawns. The Korean War in the early 1950s was a prime example. The Soviet-backed North Korea invaded the US-backed South Korea. The United Nations, led by the US, stepped in to defend the South, while China, a new communist power, entered to support the North. The war ended in a stalemate, leaving Korea divided to this day, a permanent scar of the Cold War. Then came the Vietnam War, a conflict that deeply scarred a generation of Americans. The US supported South Vietnam against the communist North Vietnam, which was backed by the Soviet Union and China. What started as sending military advisors escalated into a full-blown war with hundreds of thousands of American troops on the ground. It was a brutal, controversial war fought in dense jungles, and it became the first television war bringing the graphic realities of combat into people's living rooms every night. The war dragged on for years, cost millions of lives, and ended with a U.S. withdrawal and the victory of the communists. The conflict in Afghanistan in the 1980s was another major proxy war. The Soviet Union invaded to support a communist government, and the U.S. responded by funding and arming the local resistance fighters, known as This long, grueling war became the Soviet Union's Vietnam, draining its resources and morale. But the competition wasn't just about military might. It was also a battle for hearts, minds, and technological bragging rights. This led to one of the most exciting chapters of the era, the space race. When the Soviets launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, in 1957, it sent shockwaves through America. The beeping satellite orbiting the Earth was a clear symbol of Soviet technological superiority. It was a wake-up call. The US scrambled to catch up, creating NASA and pouring billions into science and education. The Soviets scored another victory when Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space in 1961. The pressure was on. President Kennedy responded by famously declaring that America would land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. This wasn't just about exploration. It was a powerful political statement. And on July 20th, 1969, the world watched in awe as Neil Armstrong took that one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The Apollo 11 moon landing was a monumental achievement and a decisive victory for the US in the space race, demonstrating its technological power and determination to the entire globe. So, how did this epic, half-century-long standoff finally come to an end? By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was in deep trouble. Its command economy was failing. It was bogged down in the costly war in Afghanistan, and the arms race was bankrupting the country. Change came from an unexpected place. The top. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became the new leader of the Soviet Union. He was a reformer who realized the system was broken. He introduced radical new policies. Glasnost, which meant more openness and freedom of speech, and perestroika, which was a restructuring of the economy. These reforms were like opening a pressure valve. For the first time in decades, people in the Soviet bloc could openly criticize the government. The desire for freedom, long suppressed, erupted across Eastern Europe. The symbolic climax came on November 9th, 1989, with the fall of the Berlin Wall. This concrete barrier had divided East and West Berlin since 1961, becoming the most potent symbol of the Iron Curtain and the Cold War divide. When the East German government announced that citizens could cross freely, crowds surged to the wall, chanting and celebrating. People took hammers and chisels and began to tear it down. It was a powerful, euphoric moment broadcast live around the world. The fall of the wall set off a chain reaction. Communist regimes collapsed one by one across Eastern Europe. Finally, in 1991, the Soviet Union itself, weakened by internal pressures and independence movements, formally dissolved. The Cold War was over. The bipolar world of two competing superpowers was gone, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower and ushering in a new, uncertain era of global politics. The world we live in today was fundamentally shaped by this incredible conflict. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this deep dive into the Cold War interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more history content. Let me know in the comments what you think was the most critical moment of the Cold War. See you in the next video.